Alright guys, so in the last section we went over the basic UI of Adobe Photoshop CC 2018, and we obviously learned that we can kind of click and drag things around and move them around, and we learned the basic kind of layout of everything in Adobe Photoshop. Moving forward, let's have a look at the tools panel and obviously the option panel, because the option panel changes here depending on what tools we have selected. Now I want to draw your attention quickly to your tools panel, and you'll notice that some of these have a small arrow in the bottom right hand corner, and this means that there is further tools within that tool. So if I obviously click on this paintbrush tool here, it'll come up with, so I'm clicking and holding here guys, you'll notice here that I have different tools in amongst it, right? And as you probably just saw, if we hover over a tool, it will actually give us a bit of a video as to how that tool works as well. So that's really handy if you're just getting started with Adobe Photoshop. Starting at the top, let's jump into our move tool, and you'll notice that our option kind of changed. Now in our move tool, it's pretty basic and self-explanatory. It's just going to allow us to move objects or layers around on our artboard. I'm going to show you guys how this works in a little bit more depth, because you can actually create layers and groups. Now I haven't actually gone over layers and groups. That's probably going to be the next section of these tutorials, but just bear in mind that you can kind of auto select things. So wherever you click and grab something, you can move that around, and you can actually auto select whether it be the layer or the group. And then obviously these are your alignment tools along here, so it'll allow you to align to different sections or the artboard itself. Moving down, you've obviously got our selection tools. So the selection tools obviously come in different shapes, where we can kind of click and drag out a marquee, and you'll notice that these have a marching ant. These little dotted lines here are called marching ants, and whatever's inside of that is what is selected. You can also, however, hit Command Shift and I on Mac or Control Shift and I on PC, and that will actually invert that selection, and you'll notice now that we've got these little marching ants in here, and it means that this part where we originally selected is no longer selected, but everything else is. So that's kind of really handy way of kind of inverting a selection. Perhaps you've got a large section to kind of select, and it's easier to select the smaller section and then invert it accordingly. You can also grab different ones. So if we grab the elliptical marquee tool, and if I obviously hold down Shift at the moment, you'll notice that that changes to a plus symbol, and if I hold down Alt, it'll change to a minus. So in this way you can use Shift and your Alt keys are modify tools, and they will allow you to do different things with all of your different tools. So if I hold down Shift, it'll allow me to add to that section, and we've now got all of this. And again, if I hold down Alt, I can click and drag that out, and it's now taken that little section out, right? And we've still got the little marching ants showing us what is selected. So obviously all of this here is selected, but this part inside is not. Alright, if we move on to our next selection tool, we've got our lassos. I usually only use the polygon lasso tool. A magnetic lasso tool will kind of find pixels or little parts of your image that it'll kind of snap to. Polygon lasso tool is really handy because it'll allow you to kind of click and draw out straight lines, and obviously with architecture there's a lot of straight lines, so I find it probably the easiest one to use. And again, you can kind of partner these up. I'm just going to close this by double clicking. You can partner these up with the other previous selection tools, and I can obviously hold down Shift and select an extra little component. Alright, moving down from there, we have a quick selection tool and a magic wand selection tool. These will allow you to select different parts of your image. So I'm just going to quickly grab my brush tool, which I'm going to go back into in a little bit, and I'm just going to quickly draw out a very simple box. And you'll notice here, if I grab my quick selection tool, it will select very similar pixel colors, and you can change this tolerance. So if the lower the tolerance it is, the more precise it will select that color. And if I turn this tolerance way up, it'll select perhaps more grays and that kind of thing that match very loosely that color that you selected. So the tighter the tolerance, the more precise it will be. The default's 32, and it usually works pretty well. However, if you do need to make more of a precise selection, you can always drop this back down to a lower number. Moving on from there, you've obviously got a quick selection tool. It works in a very similar way, where I can just click and drag out, and it'll kind of come and roughly select out what I need it to. I'm then going to hit Command D to remove all of that marching ants, and you'll notice it'll now just deselect. Alright, so any of your selection tools, if you hit Command or Control D, it will deselect whatever you have selected. So that's a really handy shortcut to kind of know. Moving down from there, you've obviously got your crop tool. You've also got perspective slice, but the crop tool is the main one, and you can change your ratio. So if you want a 1:1 square kind of Instagram format type deal, or you want a 16:9, whatever it takes, or you can clear it and then just go a custom job wherever you need to and click and drag these in. Obviously you can kind of change your grids and diagonals and whatnot up here in the options menu as well, and then we can obviously hit the tick here or enter to commit to the current selection. Alright, I'm going to hit escape because I obviously don't want that. That's just I usually use the crop tool obviously to crop things down, or if I want a really quick grid and making sure that everything's sitting on the rule of thirds, it'll just allow me to kind of pop up with that rule of thirds and make sure that everything's where I want it to be. Moving on down, we've obviously got our measurement tool and our eyedropper. Eyedropper is the main one I'll usually pick. It'll just allow you to click somewhere and select a certain color. So you'll see there it's either selecting white or black. A really handy tool to use. And the other one I kind of use is our ruler tool. So you can just click and drag that to 2 different points and kind of select. And if you come over into our information, it'll kind of come up here, or we've got our lengths up here in the option bar as well. Spot healing brush, I'm not really going to go into. You're not going to find that you use it too much in architecture visualization. Paintbrush, obviously you'll probably use it a fair bit, and you've obviously got brush tool, pencil tool, and a few others. Brush is the main one I use, and obviously it's very basic. You've got your different colors down here at the bottom. At the moment we got black and white, but if I double click on that, I can actually select a different color depending on what I want, and you'll notice that it'll generate a code. So if you've got a code, each color has a very specific code, and you actually, if you get a code from somewhere else, you can actually select that out. So if I go 5Fs, it'll usually be white. It's just a common code that you kind of get to know, and you'll notice here that it changes RGB values, red, greens and blues, and different values, CMYK if you really need to as well. So in that way you can kind of choose your different colors in different methods. If you're new to it, just use this slider here and select whatever kind of hues that you want or whatever color. Alright, and then that'll allow me to kind of paint however I choose. Alright, in that way you notice that it's kind of come out small. I can actually use my bracket keys to increase the size. Alright, and you notice there that this here is a really weird brush. It's not really working quite as effectively, and that's because I've got this color mixer brush. If I go back to the basic brush, and again, I've got that color selected. There we go. We can kind of quickly and easily draw out a paintbrush. Alright. Now, again, if I right click on this, I will get different kind of selections of the different brushes I want. I can obviously adjust the sizing here accordingly, and that will adjust how big the brush is. And the hardness here is how soft it is. So whether you have kind of a feather out from the center, or whether it is a nice hard brush. So if I just increase my sizing here, let's just jump up to quite big. You notice here that this here is without feather, and if I put in a hardness, alright, it's a nice clean crisp edge line. So that's what your hardness does. And the other way to select these is, or change the size in your hardness, is you hold down your Control and Alt keys, and you can click up, or click and drag up, or click and drag down. This will change how much hardness you've got, and then left or right will change the size as well. So that's another quick little option that you have there. Alright, moving on down from here, or let's just right click again, and you'll notice here you've actually got different brushes here depending on what you need, and you can download brushes from different places of the internet. I know I've got a few selections which I'll leave in the description down below. Arc9, which I'll leave a link as well, has an amazing brush set, so definitely jump onto their companies and grab their brush set down as well. Moving on, you've got our clone stamp. I'm not going to go into this tool again. Very basic. Basically, I can hold down Alt and it'll come in and select, and then I can click and drag, and you'll notice wherever it kind of has that icon, it'll kind of drag up and clone essentially whatever you've previously selected. Art history brush, I'm not going to go into. Eraser, pretty basic. We're just going to increase our size again by hitting our bracket keys, and we can just kind of get rid of that, or our square bracket keys, sorry, and you can kind of get rid of all that. Or we can just kind of create a marquee, and again just hit delete, and I'm just going to go foreground color, and there we go, nice and simple to get rid of, and then hit Command D. Moving down from here, we've obviously got our gradient tool and paint bucket tool. Pretty basic, everyone's used paint before. You can essentially just change a selection or a color. If I've got a marquee selected, I can change that color to white or whatever. Alright, pretty simple there. Depending on how you've got your thing selected, it'll color accordingly. You've got a gradient tool here, and if I double click up in here in our options bar, we can obviously select different gradients, and we can play with different sliders to adjust how our gradient will work. And then we can kind of come up through and essentially do a gradient, and you basically have to click and drag out to create your gradient in however you like. If you hold down shift, it'll snap to 90s and 45-degree angles, which is really helpful for getting it how you want, or a little bit more precision. I'm not going to go too much into your blur, sharpen and smudge just because of time constraints, or your dodge, burn or smudge tools. Your pen tool is another really handy one. I'm just going to kind of create a pen tool, and you can kind of come along and click through a series of different things, close it up. And pen tool I find is really helpful for making super precise selections, because it'll allow you to kind of map something out just like I have done. Right click and go make selection. Right, I usually have a feather radius of 2, and there we go, it's nice and selected exactly what we want to do. And then again, I can delete that again if I need to, and then hit Command D. Alright, so that's a really helpful tool. If you want to click and drag out, you get this Bezier curve where you can kind of manipulate the curve however you choose to. And then if you really want to, you can come up into here and you can click this is up in your options bar, click this rubber band, and this will actually show you kind of how it's going to be working. So you get a kind of preview of what your pen tool is doing before you even click something. So completely and totally up to you guys whether you want to use that or not. I prefer it off sometimes, but then for more precise adjustments, I'll usually turn it on. Coming down is again our type tool, and obviously with your type tool you've got your different options to change your kind of fonts however you choose to, the font size and how the settings of that, and then obviously your alignments. These other tools here I'm going to kind of breeze through pretty quickly. I've already shown you guys how to adjust colors by double clicking on these, but these other tools are pretty basic. You're not going to use them too much when you're first starting out with Photoshop. So you've got your shape tool here, or let's go back up. You've got direct selection tool, which we're not going to really go over, and then you've got this shape tool. Clicking and holding that down will show you different options. Let's just jump into our ellipse tool, and obviously we can click and drag this out. If you want to click and drag it out from the center, holding down Alt will allow you to click and drag it from the center, and holding down Shift will make it snap to a perfect circle. Alright, up in your options bar you can kind of change your fill, and you can also change your stroke. So if we go maybe yellow and we up the pixel size of that, alright, we've obviously got our size here. And you'll notice there that I was able to kind of start combining different shapes as well, which is pretty handy. You can do that by holding down Shift, and you'll notice that there we've got a few different matching circles, and we're now kind of mapping in between them. So it's kind of a handy tool if you start playing with it and using it with different things. Your next one here is a hand tool. Again, that's just basic tool. We're not going to go into it too much. Magnifier, and then you've got edit toolbar. Right, this edit toolbar, you can kind of come back in through and select all of your different tools and kind of play with them and load presets and whatever else. I don't really play with that too much. I like the default. So yeah guys, so that's going to pretty much wrap up all our tools. We'll leave it here and we'll move on to the next section of Adobe Photoshop.